Well, hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne, welcoming you to my channel. Thank you very much for finding me in the crowded world of YouTube orchid videos. If you're new here, I grow cold, cooled, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia, without a greenhouse or grow lights or humidifiers. Just me and them struggling along inside or outside, or I don't bother at all. So, plant lovers of the world, if that is your bag, hit subscribe. I post every Friday and I am a complete amateur, struggling my way through trying to figure out what and how I can grow orchids in my climate. So if that's of use, wonderful. And today, what could we be talking about? Yes, plant lovers, it is Sarcochilus time here in southern Australia. I'm in Melbourne and it is mid-spring and nearly all of my Sarcochilus are out. Which is kind of useful actually, because I can really see what colour is dominating and what colour is in the minority. But what we're going to do today, I think actually, is make two films. So part one, part two. So part one will be a visit to a specialist Sarcochilus grower to find out what he does, what's his tips and tricks about growing Sarcochilus in similar-ish conditions to me. And then part two will be a little review of mine and see where we're at with some of the seedlings I bought and repotted, some old favourites, and some new things. So that's going to be part two, which will be next week. And in part one, plant lovers, in our franchise Sarcochilus video, I was very, very fortunate enough to be introduced to a passionate Sarcochilus grower through a mutual friend who works in one of my favourite nurseries. So the nursery is Fitzroy Nursery here in Melbourne, and I'll put the link below. And that's one of the few places where you can find flowering orchids that aren't just Phalaenopsis or Cymbidiums. I bought a Sarcochilus there, for example. They have all sorts of orchids. It just depends on the growers and what's going on. So a great place to hang out. But also Dylan, who works there, is a very lovely chap and has a wonderful Instagram account, which I'll link below. And I was asking him about orchids and if he grew any, and he said, no, but you need to go and see Dan the vet. So Dan the vet, who is literally a vet, very, very kindly invited me to go and look at his Sarcochilus collection. So what we are going to do, plant lovers, without any further ado, is I'm going to put that one down and we're going to step back in time and go and visit Dan's wonderful collection, which is literally about 10 minutes away from where I am. So in terms of climate and conditions, basically the same. It was a fantastic visit. So thank you, Dylan, for introducing me to Dan, and thank you, Dan, for letting us come into your wonderful orchid house. Let's go. Dan, good to meet you.
You too.
Thank you very much. Now, Dan was introduced to me by a mutual friend from one of my favourite nurseries, Fitzroy Nursery.
Very cool nursery, yeah.
We were talking about orchids and he said, you've got to go and meet Dan the vet. As in the veterinarian, not military vet.
Yep.
And the reason being, Sarcochilus. Now, I dabble, Dan, in Sarcochilus growing.
Yep.
But Dylan did say that you were an expert.
I wouldn't say expert, but I do like them, so yeah.
Now, so here we go. It is what's mid-spring here in Melbourne, and you have the most amazing array. So I guess the first question is, how did you get into Sarcochilus?
So I always grew, well, I've always gardened. So I've gardened since I was probably 4 or 5.
Yeah. Early adopter.
Early adopter. And I used to grow just some Cymbidiums that I was given.
Yes.
And some Dendrobiums, which I think a lot of orchid growers start with.
The gateway orchid
here. The easy ones.
Yeah.
And not that these aren't easy. And then after that, I was going for a walk around the corner and I saw a neighbour loading a whole lot of orchids into the car. And I said, where are you going with those orchids? He said, oh, I'm actually going to an Orchid Society meeting.
How old were you at this point?
15, I think.
Right.
Before I could drive. And I said, oh, that's cool. Can I come? And he's like, absolutely. So it was the third Friday of the month, every month. And he would pick me up, drive me to the orchid meetings, and then drive me home. And I saw, and this neighbour, his name was Erwin, who's now in a retirement home, grew lots of Sarcochilus, lots of Australian Dendrobiums, was very good at it. He was actually part of the ANOS, the Australian Native Orchid Society as well. And so he had an amazing collection of Sarcochilus, and at the time, they weren't available in all these colours either. So he grew lots of whites, lots of pinks. Like that sort of greeny yellow was starting to become a thing, and that was really modern. But if he saw these now, I'm sure he'd be quite amazed. But
So that's an interesting point. But 2 points there. Firstly, you joined a club, which is the best thing. And if you were 15, I mean, we were just saying that we are both the youngest members in our respective orchid groups.
By a lot.
And I'm no spring chicken, just saying. They would have been so thrilled to find an enthusiastic 15-year-old.
Yeah. And even now, as a 40-year-old, I think they still get a lot of joy from having younger people there, which I think is a good thing. So I think anyone that's interested in anything, any sort of plant, orchids, should join a society. I think they're a dying sort of thing, aren't they?
They are, which is a shame, which is one of the reasons I have another channel with Steve and Ryan, that one of the things is about maintaining and preserving knowledge, that there's a lot of older people leaving the industry or passionate amateurs leaving because they're getting old or they're dying and their knowledge is just disappearing. And it does take a lifetime to kind of figure things out. You know, you can get the basics to start with, but all the nuances of particular plants does take a while. So one of the other things you mentioned though was, this was some time ago, and the array was quite limited, because I've always felt that the real hybridization of Sarcochilus has only really ramped up in the last sort of 20 years or so. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, in my memory. I'm sure Sarc growers might argue otherwise, but in my memory anyway. Probably the last 20 years.
And you had this amazing array. We might go through some of them one by one. But look, before we go any further, let's talk basics then, because a lot of people love Sarcochilus, and a lot of people outside of Australia would love to grow them. Now, we're outside, we're in Melbourne, and I'll show some shots of your shade house. Polycarbonate roof, so permanent protection from rain. Quite shady.
Probably shadier than I would like.
This is the thing that surprised me, because plant lovers, what we have is Sarcochilus growing with Masdevallia. I would never in a million years thought the two would be able to coexist.
And I think these sarcs would probably like a bit more light than I can give them, but we basically put a shade house in our very small backyard, and unfortunately we've got neighbours' trees over the fence which we can't control. So this half of the shade house, where it doesn't get quite as much sun as the other half, are where I've put the sarcs, because I know they'll tolerate a little bit less light, though they probably would like a bit more than I can give them. So.
So we've covered light. First thing is, they're probably on the shadier side of the spectrum right now. So the second thing people always ask about is temperature. So you're outdoors, you've got a little bit of protection. What would you go down to as a winter minimum here?
Probably 4 or 5
degrees centigrade. I'll drop the Fahrenheit in below. So what about in summer?
So
where would you get to in summer?
So like anywhere in Melbourne, it can get sort of 40, low 40s. But we're lucky we don't get it for more than probably 2 or 3 days in a row.
And you're open at the side, so you will get breeze. And when the weather, and in Melbourne, you tend to get a cool change within 48 hours if there is extreme temperature. So it will blow through. I'm still, though, just amazed at the light. Anyways, okay, so we've done light, we've done temperature. Now watering. What is your regime? Do you have one? Are you a calendarized
Probably not as strict
as
I should be. The sarcs love water. Like these fleshy leaves, if you don't water them enough, they go quite shriveled quite quickly.
Okay, because I'm a bit treat them mean when it comes to watering.
Yeah, they love water. So in summer, these are watered daily.
Oh, right, okay. All right, so I guess Exhibit A, very, very fleshy leaves. And this is a hybrid called, oh goodness me.
You might be able to read it better than I. Kulnura Sanctuary by Kulnura's Kaleidescope. So all the Kulnura ones come from Scott Barry, who's Burrito Orchids up in New South Wales, who is a very amazing hybridizer and grower of sarc.
And there they are. And I'll drop the details of that nursery in below. Right, so first thing I have learnt then is I don't water mine, I don't think, as often as you do. I do keep mine on the dry side.
So in summer, these get watered daily.
Okay.
And they want a good soak till the water runs out the bottom.
And in winter?
Probably once a week in here.
Yes, I'm probably, not dissimilar, I guess. I'm not feeling so bad about myself. Okay, water. Now, potting medium. What have we got? A small...
Do you want me to grab some?
So here we've got a cross called Sarah-Kate, and you can probably see the medium in there, which looks to me like a sort of smallish bark mix.
Yeah, so this is a 9 to 12 millimeter mix.
Yeah.
It's a bark. This is Orchiata, which is a specific one that I really like to use. It comes from New Zealand. And it's just really clean and dust-free, and because of the way it's treated before it's bagged, it actually lasts a lot longer in the pot than your run-of-the-mill bark. So if you can get this bark, this is probably the better one. Yeah, it doesn't decompose in the pot anywhere near as quickly, which means the roots are happier, because once the mix starts to decompose and it doesn't sort of get air through it, the sarc roots aren't happy and the plant just falls apart. So
okay, then sub-question, repotting. How often would you repot?
They can actually tolerate quite a small pot. So if you pick up, like this one probably will need repotting this year. But if we look at it, you can see it's quite
It's a very, very
full.
dense plant.
Yeah. So probably every 2 to 3 years, I would repot them.
Fabulous colour. But they're not going to, it won't be adversely affecting the plant if you don't, because they do like it.
No. So yes, you can see it's got all its roots hanging out, and it's
Yeah.
not particularly unhappy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I guess something else that people often ask about such plants is the aerial roots. Now, if they, for example, you've got some dead ones here,
Yeah.
would you trim them?
If I was repotting it, I would.
And if you were repotting and
Yep.
some of these were inside the mix, would you feel that was a problem?
Yeah, no, I'd probably just shove them in the pot and put the bark around it.
Yeah. I feel that they're pretty tough.
Yeah.
They're very forgiving of
They are.
any mistakes. Okay, so we've got to our potting. Now, the other question people always will ask about is fertilizing. What's your regime?
So
again, like with watering, are
Yep.
you calendarized
Not
every
really.
third day?
If I'm repotting them, I'll quarter fill the pot with bark, and then I'll sprinkle maybe a little bit of Osmocote in there, sit the plant back on top, and then fill it back with bark.
So Osmocote is a slow release fertilizer?
Correct, yeah, so slow release. Otherwise, if they're not getting repotted, all these just get is a liquid feed, and they get it weekly from September through till probably April, and then I don't feed through the winter.
So that is spring, summer, autumn here in
Yep,
Australia and the
that's
Southern
correct.
Hemisphere?
Yeah.
Okay. Not dissimilar to me, so I'm feeling relieved, Dan. Okay, now what have we got up to? We have done light, temperature, potting, water, fertilizer, humidity.
Yeah, so...
Well, here we are outside.
Yeah.
I can't see a humidifier.
No. We've got a watering system overhead. So
yes.
It is automatic, but I still prefer to hand water. I find even with the automatic watering, there's always a plant somewhere in a corner that doesn't get
So this is
enough.
a sprinkler system, not a misting system.
Correct.
This is about watering, not humidity.
Correct,
Right.
yeah. But having said that, if it's a really hot 45-degree day, I will turn it on for a few minutes just to
Cool
dampen
things
everything
down. Yeah, me too. Okay, so we've done humidity, pests, Dan.
Yeah.
What are your... tell me your
Even here
problems.
there are pests.
What happens?
Because they're so fleshy, scale just loves the underside of a Sarcochilus
Do
leaf.
they? And what do you do for scale?
So I usually just rub them off, and a bit of pest oil is fine.
Yeah.
They'll take that. The other thing is, obviously, because they're so fleshy, snails and slugs.
Yeah.
Leaves and flowers.
And we were just looking at this.
Yeah, there are a few around that are
little one
affected.
here. So there you have got snail munching and caterpillars.
Yep.
I'm surprised though,
Caterpillars,
your bench is very elevated.
Yep.
They're very tenacious and
Yeah.
adventurous slugs and snails.
They are. Yep, they are.
Otherwise though, they're kind of tough,
They
easy, and not many things will have a go at them.
Yep. We did have this year some mice in the orchid house which were eating. Yeah, some mice that were eating buds off the racemes of the dendrobiums over there. But fortunately, I was keeping a keen eye. They haven't got the sarks. I'd be very disappointed if they did.
That is bizarre. Very sophisticated
Yeah.
taste in your rat and your mice. All right, Dan, I think we've covered then the basic care. So I guess the two things I'm taking away from this is one, yours are much shadier than mine, which relieves me because like you, I struggle to get enough light. And I think anyone who's passionate about growing plants in the inner city is not going to have vast amounts of space. So you kind of got to make do. So that's reassuring. The second thing is you water more than me, so I am going to water more.
Okay, yes, summer, every day.
All right, Dan, I will, I promise. Now, let's just take us through your collection. So I noticed you've got a really beautiful form of hartmannii, which is one of the species origin plants.
And
I think there's only about 22, 23 recognized species in the genus, so there's not that many to hybridize from, and most of them essentially look the same.
They do, they do.
So it's taken a long time to get scarlet, yellow, pink, purple, spots.
Absolutely,
So this is hartmannii. Look at that, absolutely beautiful. I find weirdly mine flowers at least 2 weeks before all of my hybrids, but yours are all out together.
Yeah, they're all out together. So
can I just also maybe just show the views too? You can see that kind of growth habit, so that the stems of the plant, I mean, it looks a little vanderish, but obviously it produces multiple growth points. But I recently saw a mature specimen at the weekend at an orchid group, and the plant must have been 20 years old. And these stems had grown so long that
in every direction.
It was like this amazing pendulous plant with flowers everywhere.
Yeah.
So that is now my aim in life.
And they would look really good when they get that big, even like a hanging basket.
Yeah. Okay, so hartmannii species sort of origin, and then everything in between. So what would some of your favorites of these hybrids
Well,
be?
I guess the thing that I love about them is just the passioning on the flowers. So even if we look at something like this, like you look at it and go, oh, it's just a little pink sark. But if you look really closely, you can see the patterning there on the flowers.
Yeah, and also the reverse of the flower. If we can turn, hang on, let's see if we can do that without snapping the stem.
Turn it around.
There we go. So you can see the reverse of the flower also has this really beautiful mottling. And when the bud's closed, it's often not a true indication of what the flower's going to be like.
Correct.
Because
often like the back of these, I'll grab that one out in a sec, the red ones often start off with sort of white buds, I suppose, so you don't even know.
This is a beauty.
So this is one of my favourites.
And look at that.
So
Goodness
this
me,
one,
look at these plants. So what is it about them that you love?
I just like that they're so delicate, and when you show someone one of these, their first reaction is often, is that really an orchid? And that's cool, because I think cymbidiums are instantly recognisable as an orchid.
And phalaenopsis.
So I think that they're really cool from that point of view. And I think also just their size, like they're really compact. For people that don't want to grow something that's going to fill a 10-inch pot, I think these are awesome. You can get a lot of flowers on them, and they're really rewarding. The only downside, I think, is that the flowers just don't last anywhere near as long as something like a cymbidium. So you might get 2, maybe 3 weeks out of this. And if you've got a few hot days in Melbourne, like we've just had, where it's sort of in the high 20s, it really speeds up
that whole life cycle.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any of your hybrids are fragrant?
No, none of these. I'd say none. I don't think any of these are particularly fragrant.
No.
Not
Now,
like the dendroids.
Before we get to fragrance, which we will, I just want to lift up this one here. Apricot. Look at that colour.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And actually, if we look at the reverse of the flower too, you can see how very different it is. So when the bud is formed, you would never know. And I guess this is one of the things when you're crossing and hybridizing, you've just got to wait until the flower actually opens. So this is Rebecca cross topaz, Kulnura cross Kaleidescope. Goodness. That's a little complex genetic history, but what a stunning apricot flower.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
So I think it's true to say within 20 years, basically, we've gone from the hartmannii with its white flower and red speckles to basically, I was going to say every colour under the sun, but not blue. And
I think the other species that's been used a lot is Fitzgeraldii, which is sort of a wishy-washy pink as well.
But now there is one other hybrid that we've got lurking, not hybrid, sorry, species that we've got here, which is falcata. Now,
that one does smell,
So that is a very, very tiny flower. You've got it mounted, but this smells like spilt vanilla ice cream on a hot sunny day, about 20 minutes after you dropped it. It's beautiful though. So I'm surprised. Although often fragrance is recessive in hybriding.
And I don't know that falcatus has been used a lot in this sort of hybridization, I wouldn't have thought.
This is a stunner. Now, here's a question for you though, Dan. I am observing a mount. Talk to me about mounts.
There are a lot of orchids that do well on mounts. I don't mount a lot of things only because once they're mounted like that, they do need a lot more water and a lot more moisture. So I just don't do it, only because I can't keep the moisture up to them. So everything is pot grown unless it really can't be.
No, I'm with you on that. I just, our airborne temperatures are just too dry in summer. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is deflasking. You did mention flasking. Now, I've deflasked, I've tried it twice. The first thing was with, I can't remember what it was now, but it was obscure and 100% failure rate. I don't know what I was doing. I did it at the wrong time of year. The next thing I tried was Doresis, and I've got, I'd probably say maybe a 40% success rate and very vigorous plants. But I want to show the viewers what you've done because the stats are amazing. So we will swing around and have a look.
Go for it.
Okay, now tell me everything. Flasking, Dan, or deflasking 101.
I think they're probably one of the easier orchids to deflask. So I've got a few flasks down here that are seedlings from flask, and I had a pretty much 100% success rate with these.
When did you deflask this one?
So this one was done probably 2 years ago. So I put them into a 50 ml tube.
And if we have a look at that plant, it's already got 2 extra or additional growth points coming out. So in year 2, it's already beginning to bulk
Yeah,
up.
so
as a
that should
plant.
really flower next year. So the one that you've got,
Yeah.
that's 3 years from flask, and you can see it's flowering. So that's the other good thing with sarks. You often don't have to wait that long for them to flower from flask, like 2 or 3 years.
That is amazing.
Yep.
And have you repotted these at all?
Yeah, so they start in these 50 ml tubes
Yeah.
for the first 2 years, and then usually if they've got roots coming out the bottom like that, I'll move them into these square pots, which I think are 80 ml.
Yeah. And what are you doing with all these, Dan?
I don't know. No, so I tend to select the ones that I want to keep,
Yeah.
and then the ones I don't get sold to buy more potting mix usually, or pots.
Oh, there you go. Well,
Yeah.
that's a nice kind of
Yeah.
cyclical process.
Yeah, or more flasks.
Yeah. Now, for our American viewers,
Yeah.
tell us where you get the flasks from,
Yeah.
because you too in the States will be able to do this.
Yeah, so a lot of my seedlings come from Scott Barry, Burrito Orchids, and he does sell in the States as well. So he often visits with flasks.
And
So
sells
if you want
flasks.
some really cool colours, some really modern hybrids, then yeah, that's the place to go.
I'll put his links below. And there's a couple of really passionate Sarcochilus hybriders at the moment in Australia, and he certainly is one. Well, that is amazing to see. I think the great thing is just that fastness in flowering from a seedling. Mind you, I mean, this is 3 years. You can also get a cymbidium to flower in 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, really good growing conditions. I feel like you could probably more easily reliably flower these from flask.
Yeah,
quicker.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, now the next thing then I want to talk to you about is division. Dividing. So let's talk dividing. Now here is a very perky, healthy plant with no flowers though.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that is, but even in my shade house, sometimes they don't flower.
So I actually don't think I'm brave enough.
Yep.
So talk us through the dividing process. How old would this plant be, do you think?
This one's probably 5 years old.
Yeah.
Um,
And quite vigorous. You've
Yep.
got multiple growth points and quite mature stems.
And yeah, I don't often divide sarks because I do think they make really good specimens, and because as a specimen they're not that big anyway, so I like to leave them alone.
And as we saw, when you've got sort of branches and multiple flower spikes,
another
and you
best.
will get multiple spikes on each stem.
Correct.
So that's a big, massive colour.
It is.
Obviously, dividing it, you're reducing.
Yeah, so to divide it's really simple. Like I would tip this out of the pot,
Yeah.
and you can see each sort of stem, if you like, is all attached right down the base. So I would tip this out of the pot, I'd get a really sharp knife, and I would just cut each stem off individually with some roots and pot it into probably a 80 ml tube.
Would you treat the cut?
No, just straight in.
Stick it in.
Straight in, yeah.
And it's that easy.
Yeah, they actually divide really, it doesn't usually set them back either. Like I think they really take off. These ones were divided probably 6 months ago.
Okay.
Some tubes. So.
Wow, and they are looking very, very healthy.
Yeah.
And so both the division and the mother plant will still flower the following
Yeah,
season?
what I usually, if I'm going to really divide one of the sarks up, I'll divide it so there's no longer really a mother plant. I'll divide it into individual ones like this.
Yeah.
So I end up with a whole lot of little ones.
And this is part of the, I guess, the economy in that you then use the money gained to buy potting
Well,
mix.
that's how I justify it to my wife, that it's a self-paying hobby.
It is. Well, it is. It is.
Yeah.
I, alas, am not at that point. I have no justification. Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time and showing us your shade house and your amazing Sarcochilus collection.
I hope it's inspired everyone to grow a sarcochilus. I think everyone can grow one. Even if you don't have a shade house, just under the eave somewhere, a bit of morning sun.
Yeah.
they
What
do
about
well.
as an indoor plant, though? What are your thoughts about growing them exclusively inside?
I think they'd prefer to be outside. They
Yeah.
need the fresh air. I don't think they'd grow really well inside.
No, I've never heard of anyone doing particularly well with sarks inside, which is
Yeah.
perhaps not great for those of you with really cold winters.
Yeah,
in the Northern Hemisphere.
yeah, the frost would really probably kill all these fleshy leaves, I think.
Yeah,
They'd get
they
quite
would.
burnt.
But if you were in a more Mediterranean climate, so I guess parts of California and parts of Europe, you can certainly grow these outside as we do, basically, still with relatively cold winter minimums, but it doesn't really affect them. That is a stunning plant. Dan, thank you very much
You're
for your
most
time.
welcome. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. So there we are. Dan, thank you so much. Wasn't that interesting? And I think it's important to remember there isn't one way to do anything, and there certainly isn't one way to grow orchids. But it's great to find out how other people grow them and to see if you want to take on some of those tricks or advice or techniques that other people are using to see if it works for your climate, because it is very, very specific to your own climate and conditions as to the hows and the whys and the whats. There isn't just one universal method. But two things I have taken away, actually maybe three, that I've taken away from Dan. Firstly, Sarcochilus can deal with a lot less light than I imagined. Second thing is, Dan Sarcochilus really love his watering schedule. The leaves look really fleshy and fat and juicy. I must say I don't water as often as him. I don't think my plants necessarily look the worse for it, but I do think his leaves are thicker and greener than mine. So that's something else to bear in mind. The third takeaway is don't be afraid of dividing them. Dan was quite clear that it's a brutal process. You basically pull the plant apart so that each growing stem with roots becomes a new plant, so there's no mother plant left. I've never really felt the urge to tackle splitting because I do want specimen plants that are really large and beautiful. So I don't think I'll need to get to that dividing point, but should I now have the courage to do so. So thank you, Dan. And I also didn't leave empty-handed. Thank you very much, Dan, for the gift of this, one of his seedlings, which is a very beautiful flower, and it doesn't really have a name. It's a cross between Sarcochilus rosella LP and Gabriella, something I can't read. But anyway, a beautiful orchid, a beautiful Sarcochilus. And thank you very much, Dan, for your generosity. And the other thing is, so that's actually the fourth thing, I think I am going to have a go at some of those other species Sarcochilus. So I've got two. I've got hartmannii and I've got Ceciliae, which is a very different type of Sarcochilus and flowers at a different time of year. But Dan's fragrant species Sarcochilus, oh, the fragrance was beautiful. So I feel I need that in my life, and I might try and find one somewhere, somehow, soon. So thank you very much again, Dan, for sharing your grow space with us and for sharing your experience of growing Sarcochilus. Could you imagine him turning up as a 15-year-old to an orchid society? Everyone's eyes would have lit up. Someone young to carry on the baton of learning and growing orchids. So thank you for sharing your knowledge, Dan. And I will just stress again how useful it can be to join an orchid society wherever you are, because you will find like-minded people and great information. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much, Dan. And I look forward to seeing you next week for part 2, when we'll look at my Sarcochilus. So wherever you are, take care. And I hope your orchids are being their best selves. And I look forward to seeing you next week.